So welcome to another Living Bridges conversation. Today we're joined by Prakhar Bhartiya, who is somebody who actively works on building bridges and whose support has been invaluable last year to us because you also offered us a workshop. Um, and the reason that I'm excited to have this conversation with you is, well, it is partly the depth of your experience. You started with Youth Alliance in 2008, but also that now you're the co-founder of the Indian School of Democracy, which has this radical, I think your word is audacious goal of positively impacting how democracy is experienced by each person in India. And you do this by having spaces that can hold people with different beliefs and different political backgrounds, which is, in a word, super cool. So thank you for being here and welcome. And for anybody who's watching, this will be a part of our fundraising effort for which we will say some shameless things at the very end. So please stay tuned for that as well. So, Prakhar, maybe we just dive right in. I know a little bit about you, but would you be willing to share a bit about your journey and what brought you to this point in your journey?
Thank you, Mansi. Uh, so I think born and brought up in Kanpur and with the usual middle class, engineering was the aspiration. Went to engineering college in Ghaziabad, private college, and not very good in academics, so went to an average college. But I think in college I found out something that there are so many people around me who have so many different ideas as they are coming to our engineering space in early 20s. But eventually all of them will get on that assembly line to become
Mm.
mostly 90% IT engineer, and rest here and there they will go to other. No matter if I'm an electrical engineer or an electronics engineer, everyone will go to IT only. And I think over there it felt like something is wrong somewhere. So that was I think one click that happened. We all are going in one direction only, while we chose a 4 year degree which was very different than what we are ending at. So there was some problem that I felt in the system. On the parallel, what happened, my connection and roots to the villages were very strong. So all my summer vacation during schools, in the first initial year in the engineering also were in a rural village, my own, like my grandfather's village near Kanpur, which still today also doesn't have electricity. No matter the entire country is electrified, but my village and surrounding areas still there is no electricity in rural Kanpur. So somewhere that inequity was very visible, and I think for me the whole idea became that if young people get to see the reality of our country, their choices will change. So I think that became the thesis for me, that we all have innate goodness within us. It is just because of our experiences we are kept away from the realities of the world, and that's why we don't choose what is more important, and we go into regular things which are giving us money, which is important in life, but not making a difference. So I think from that, this whole thought came: can I start connecting young people to different causes? So I began Youth Alliance, and then I think slowly, it also started making sense to me. Okay, this is leadership program. I was not aware of the words like empathy, compassion. The whole idea was ki, we will take a bunch of young people, take them to the rural part, and make them see what is happening. One simple philosophy was that just because you know English and you dress in a certain way, you don't know the solution to the problems of the villages. So you don't go over there as a problem solver.
Yeah.
I like the cat. Good,
Yeah,
we have an audience
I think she
also.
wants to be. Today, my cats want to be part of the interview, so I'm just going to let them. It's,
Yeah. So I think that was very clear that you can't be a problem solver just because you know English or you dress in a certain. You have to go there as an observer and learn. So that became the core philosophy of Youth Alliance. You go there as an observer. If you really want to do something, stay long term. And I would
right.
very like clearly challenge them if they came up with a solution within like 3 days of being in the program. I would say I stay for 2 years, then only so suggest a solution. Otherwise, you don't have any right to suggest a solution in an ecosystem which is so new to you. So did that. I think while doing that, a lot of new things came up. Many young people started joining development sector. I think multiple of them started their own organization, and then I started seeing there's some positive shift happening in the mindset also of the people who are coming in the program, and the overall idea of inner transformation became very strong. The moment one connects with our own purpose of life or starts walking that or starts walking that path of finding our own purpose, I think something inside starts shifting. You start questioning, more questions come in the heart. And I think that gave me a lot of courage to think. Eventually, while did that for around 10 years, and then this whole thought came that can we do something similar for political space?
Mm.
And I know it was much more difficult, much more tougher to imagine
Right.
principled politician or thinking of politicians who are coming from a space of inner transformation, service mindset in today's time. It was possible maybe in 1930s, 40s, or 50s, but today, imagining the way the situation is, it was difficult. But then I think took that leap of faith along with my co-founder Himakshi in 2018, and thought that can we nurture principled politician whose aim is to work for Sarvodaya and
Mm.
not just self Uday. So I
Mm.
think that became very, very
Yeah.
clear goal. It's been
Mm.
an enjoyable 3.5 years journey. Yeah.
Mm. I love that word self, Uday. That gives such a picture of what the sort of, what the, almost like the difference between what you're saying happens to people when they're opening to realities that are not their own. It's almost like there's a similar opening to the fact that it's not just about me. My choices are not just about me. And that seems like a very interesting bridge to begin with. Just that when by being open to the world, we find ourselves somewhere moved to contribute to it or to do something about it. I heard you say there's something that happens when this happens, but what is that something? Why do you think most of us, when we start looking inward, we also almost organically start looking more towards our role in community? Why do you think that happens?
So I think a lot of people, because I work with young people in early 20s, and there are so many questions that come in them. Uh, and very rarely in our society we have spaces, being in classroom or our families, wherein questions are encouraged.
Hmm.
Often, the moment you ask a question from a teacher which is somewhere away from the subject, the response will be to shut up. In
Yeah.
families, also, the response will be shut up. So, there are very few spaces wherein we encourage people to pursue questions. Everyone wants to give you answers, which might not be my answer. So, and I think there's one of our mentors, he gave me a very beautiful line that answers are fixed, but questions are moving, and questions may make you help you navigate. And sometimes in this quest of understanding what is my own purpose, I think these questions become a very guiding light. So uh, how do I get to exactly know why am I born? I think very, very fundamental question around purpose. Uh, and somewhere on that quest, at least in my understanding, this reality of interconnectedness hits us.
Hmm.
Somewhere in that process, there's someone around me, in my city, in my village, who is not even getting access to basic food or basic water or basic sanitation, those kind of things. Our innate ability to empathize with the other person, it's there within us. It's just that over the years of experiencing world in a certain way, which is a little
Right.
bit of greed driven, a little bit of insecurity. We are forced to go into competition. That there's only one seat in the medical examination. Engineering is difficult. There are only 90 people who will become IAS officer.
Right.
That we are wired to think that the world out there is a very difficult place, which it is also sometimes. But then our own innate ability to trust our own intuition, the people around us, it goes for a toss. And then how do we create a safe space wherein people are accepted as they are, they're acknowledged for who they are. And I think then that layer just breaks away. And
Right.
then people get to see what's there inside their heart. And I think that light sometimes makes us do wonderful things.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you speak about the innate um, ability inside each of us to contribute to one another, to connect with each other, because that's very much at the heart of this process that we use in Living Bridges often, and which I believe you've come across, which is nonviolent communication. And I'm just curious about your experience with NVC and whether, what did it, well, just your experience with NVC. How was it, and how does it link up and have relevance, I think, in the social space? That's perhaps the most important question.
Thank you. Uh, I think I've shared with you personally, but I'm sharing again. So my end goal for myself, I see, I think maybe eventually post ISG also after a decade or so, is to work on truth and reconciliation. And a lot of work when I was like reading about it, and otherwise also, I think a lot of philosophy goes back to non-violent communication. Our own ability to engage with a person, understanding their context, and using a language, both verbal and physical, which is much more inclusive and which is much more inviting. Because where we are, I think the world is extremely polarized in different ways, and there are multiple reasons. One is political polarization, then there's polarization because of inequity, then there's polarization because of how capitalism is growing. How, if you see in the last 2 years, and I think 10 days back, the inequity report has also come in, and you see that on one side, major population of our country has become much more poor, but then there are maybe 10 families in our country who have become like 50% more richer. So there's something, and all those also are polarization which are not visible in some way in terms of visible in terms of its impact, but people are suffering. And I think if we have to truly imagine a world which is much more humane, which is much more just, we have to bring together those voices. And if those voices have to come together to rethink what the world should look like, there should be a common connecting language. And for me, I think non-violent communication is that connecting language which will try to understand what does a billionaire think and not abuse a billionaire because he or she is a billionaire, and which will try to understand what does a person who is like a daily wage earner thinks, and not say that you are not working hard, that's why you are like this, or do something like or something which is much more negative. And I think that language is missing in our popular discourse. Uh, I think one thing for I think us at an Institute of Democracy, and otherwise also personally, something that has been very inspiring is Sabarmati Ashram of 1920s. And I don't know if Gandhi used non-violence communication, but he had that language to bring a Sardar Patel, a Nehru, a Sarojini Naidu, a Vinoba Bhave, a Rajaji, who all were very different political, had very different political ideologies. Vinoba Bhave was a spiritual saint kind of a person. Rajaji had are very different political ideologies. Nehru was an ultra liberal. So everyone different kind of people, but they came together at one place called Sabarmati Ashram because their fundamental uh, faith or fundamental idea was to build India, to imagine India and how it will look like, what will independence bring. And I think that's something which is missing today. Today we don't have a place in our country, or maybe in the world also, I've not heard of a place wherein people from such different political ideologies like Rajaji and Nehru come together, or Vinoba Bhave come together to talk about what the world should look like, and and people who are influential. These are not ordinary people sitting in a small cafe or in a workshop. These are people who are running the country, who eventually made what India is today, and they shed their egos down and came together. And for me, I think that language was Gandhi's language in Sabarmati Ashram. His own idea, his own ability to mobilize a Birdla also. He was not someone who would abuse Birdla, but he had that ability to bring in front of J.D. Birla what is the need of a country. Because he was able to connect with the peasants also, bring their understanding to an Birla and take Birla's understanding to the peasant. So that's, I think, for me, what is non-violence communication. I don't know if I made it too long, but
No,
that's
absolutely.
what I feel is missing.
No, and absolutely. And I love this. There's several threads I'm picking up on. One is around the value of having a vocabulary that aims to connect people, that can reorient language from getting things done or diagnosing each other or judging each other to actually getting to the heart of what's important to you and what's important to me. And I found this really inspiring that people from very different walks of life or different perspectives, different ways of doing things and different belief systems, which are all very important to each of them, could nonetheless rally around a cause. They could still come together around one core purpose. And for me, that's really I mean, that's beautiful because that's the heart of purpose driven movement or purpose driven change in any way. So I found that really moving. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that brings me kind of organically to this question that I have about um, right now. I mean, polarization, as you talked about it, there's economic and social and political divides, but there are also these little threads of polarization inside of us. It's almost like we're being told that your social change outlook is different from what you do at home, or your personal or the personal is different from the political. So to keep them separate, as if they're almost segmented parts of us. So I want to ask you to talk a little bit about this bridge between the personal and the political, because to my mind, there's very little that we can do that is not political. Everything we say has ripples, and therefore it does have to do with influencing and um, yeah, I mean, articulating our own beliefs. So how do we find a way to reconcile these almost separate edges, I guess,
Yeah.
seemingly separate
Thank
edges?
you for asking that. Yeah, I think it reminds me of a conversation while I was at my graduate school. I remember a heated conversation with a now very dear friend. At that time, we were just becoming friends, I would say.
Mm,
And I said to him that everything that is personal is political as well. There's nothing personal which is not political.
mm,
And then he got a little offended or sad that no, how can you say that everything is political? I said everything is political. If I wear a kurta, it's a political thing. If
right.
I speak Hindi amid Indians and not choose to speak in English, it is political.
Mm,
Because I want to speak Hindi, because there are some Indian people who don't speak such fluent English and they will feel odd. So if I'm making a choice to do that, it's a statement that I'm making,
mm,
and for multiple other things. Uh, but nah, eventually we became very good friends, and we became brainstorming partners. And I think one of the reasons why we became such good friends was that we both believed in very different political ideologies.
mhm,
We both had very different thoughts of how the world should be, and we started seeing meaning in that. I started seeing meaning because I have never engaged with someone who thinks like that before,
mm,
and he, I think, they had never engaged with someone who thinks like I think, and there was some meaning over there. But it took a while. It took multiple, and we got that opportunity because we were in the same college, and this is masters when I was doing a couple of years back. And because we were in the same space, we were engaging,
mm,
and we could see the human side of each other. I cooked sometimes, he came over, ate food. Today, what we are doing is we are not giving enough time when we are engaging into a difficult conversation. And half the time, the conversation is happening on social media. So
mm,
there is no emotion, just the words are coming. And I think we all know at some level that I think it is 20-30% which is words. It is the emotion that changes the conversation much more.
yeah.
And on social media, it's emotion dead space. Uh, so how do we also create spaces wherein we
Mm,
can talk and listen to each other completely, not just the 20-30% verbal part of it? I think that becomes a huge challenge. And that's why, at least over the last couple of years, I have tried to not engage on social media in 100 words, telling what I
mm,
believe in.
mm,
And sometimes I used to get a feedback, why do you write like a 300-word post? I said, I can't do justice to what I'm thinking in 50 words. Otherwise, I will not write only.
mm,
So I think that's one important thing, that how do we navigate that space, because we all are
yeah.
a result of how we have grown up in our own circumstances, and some things are so innate that we can't change our behavior. It takes a lot of time and openness. So in that case, I think dialogue again actually becomes a central piece of constantly engaging
Mm,
and listening to the other person, and also keeping that openness that somewhere what the other person is speaking is his or her truth.
mm,
This whole idea of my truth is the only truth becomes a little problematic, and sometimes uh, on either side, I think there are multiple sides. So now there is no more two sides, left or right, but there are multiple sides, and I think sometimes the moral high ground that people take, I think
mm,
that becomes a challenging thing. I've also done that mistake. I've also taken moral high grounds on multiple things. I still can, maybe I do take. I'm not even conscious of it, but I do take sometimes today also. But I think taking moral high ground becomes like the most tricky thing, and that is somewhere I think which breaks the whole idea of dialogue. And then I think people do it out of not exactly revenge, but they have to now show the other person the right place because someone has taken a moral high ground. They will do it much more to rub off,
Hmm.
and I think that becomes a little tricky part.
Hmm.
I think at the core of it, we all know that person is political. It takes a lot of courage
Hmm.
to practice our politics in personal life. I think that is something that journey I'm also on personally. And it is very simple thing. It's simple thing that if I am getting 2.5 days of or 2 days of off in a month, and after that I'm having 4 Sundays and then 2 Saturdays off, which is 8 days in a month. Am I giving that much off to the person who is coming to cook food in my home? Because that's politics, and it
Hmm.
takes courage for me to give 8 days of off because then I know 8 days I have to work at home,
Hmm. Hmm.
or me and my partner have to figure out a way. And
Hmm.
then there's also politics in this whole idea that my partner will only do the work and I will sit because I do Indian School of Democracy or I'm a male. So it takes a lot of courage to live our politics in our personal life, and that's where I think a lot of us falter. I falter for sure, and it's an ongoing journey. I'm grateful that I have a strong-headed partner who
Yeah.
shows me my truth.
Also same.
Sorry, that's a personal incident. 2 days back, we were sitting and she asked me, "Tell me what are the things in our home that you consciously do?"
Hmm.
And then I said, I'll take care of this, this. No, no. See, that non-living things. What are the non-living things in the home that you consciously take care on a day-to-day basis? And then it made me thinking, okay, what are the things? Is it vegetables? Do I bring vegetables on time? If Didi is not coming, do I automatically go and clean the home?
Hmm.
Often not. And I think that's what will take to truly live my politics in my personal life. So I think the fault I see sometimes is that we don't have courage or capacity to live what is personal, what is political in our personal life. Otherwise, I think for me, everything that I'm doing personally is also political. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like that. That's such a. I mean, for me, I'm also hearing it's not just about courage. This is the same thing as you said about being open to different realities. Because for many women across the country, getting up and cleaning the house if Didi hasn't come is not even something one thinks about. I mean, I'm not including myself in this. I want to say I'm exceptionally lazy and very blessed to have a very, very patient partner as well. But but I think this is in some moments, it means that I have to, not I don't have to, but I want to invite my partner into my world and share that this is a layer of reality that I live with that I don't even think about, for which I have to be aware, and which he has to be open. So I'm hearing again almost kind of like an interpersonal dialogue,
Yeah.
which answers my question about the personal and political, because that mirrors this larger dialogue that we have with other people. Yeah. And I want to
What gender divide happens in my home is becomes exponential when I talk about the country. It
mm,
is largely the same, and I see myself as relatively more aware male than largely where the society is.
mm,
Not taking any moral high ground, but just because of the experiences I've had in my life, the mentors I've had, they've shown more light on me. And
mm.
when there's a light that falls on you, you see your dark sides also. So
Yes,
I've been lucky to see my dark sides much more.
yes,
But I think it's exactly what happens at our home is what happening in our societies.
yeah.
Yeah.
I want to get back to this thing about the moral high ground, because this I found very interesting, um, for two reasons. One, that I like to think of living bridges and compassion and what we do as something that stands in between um, different realities, polar opposites, and all the shades in between. And so, in a sense, this is this middle path, but it's so easy to kind of, that is a political stand to take, which is very different from politicizing it inside me or outside me and saying this is the right way to go. And it's very easy to fall into that trap, because we often, so much goes into us, I guess, coming to that point of understanding what we want to do and what's right for us. And I don't know how to safeguard against that. I mean, I think dialogue is one of those things, but is there anything else that one can do to keep in mind that we don't become rigid around our own takes or our own standpoints? How do we stay open to each other, especially when the stakes are so high? Because the stakes just seem to keep getting higher now.
So I think one thing for us, how it has been helpful at ISD is that because we work with people who are actually contesting election on ground, so just listening to their reality and relatively how easier it is for me to talk about Sarvodagi politics and when they are contesting election and they are seeing what's happening from violence to money to everything. So it brings a lot of humility just by just putting the ear on ground and seeing okay, this is the reality. What I'm talking is 100 years later maybe,
Hmm.
and there's a huge gap into what is happening on ground and what I'm talking. So I think that brings a lot of humility. Uh, there are two kinds of moral high ground. I don't know. At least as we were talking, this came to me. There are two kinds I'm seeing. One is setting the benchmark high,
Hmm.
which may be like a Sabarmati ashram is a benchmark in my life. I don't know whether we'll be able to reach there, but there's a benchmark. And I think I remember I was in Democracy Express and we were doing an open space conversation, and someone asked me a question about the same Sarvodaya thing. And the answer that came in that moment was that there needs to be a lighthouse telling, okay, this is what lighthouse is.
Hmm.
Lighthouse will never shift from their place. And that's like moral, a place which will keep questioning you, okay, what was the choice you make? Lighthouse will never judge a ship that you are going in right direction or wrong direction.
Hmm.
The role of lighthouse is just to show the light. Okay, this is the direction you are going. It is right, wrong. The ship has to choose.
Hmm.
And similarly, people have to choose who are coming at ISD. Is it right direction or wrong direction? Our role will be to just show the light. Okay, which direction are we going? So I think that's what I shared with them. So I think that's one kind of
Yeah.
a moral space or a moral high ground kind of thing we can say,
It's
in
more
which
about
we are
value.
not putting.
So that's more like a value driven, like that has to do with values versus, I guess, judgment in a way. Would you
Yeah,
find?
I can say that I think value as a judgment also, but often people say to us also that ISD is taking a moral high ground and telling what is principle leaders, how can you define
Right.
principles,
Hmm.
and because principles are again they're relative.
Hmm.
So there's constant value choices that we are making over this versus this, transparency over maybe something which is integrity. What do I choose? So those conflicts will always be there. Second, I think moral high ground, which is more problematic, at least for me, is like the like if we talk about India and social media, or if I talk about US also, so there's a conservative side and there's a liberal side. And conservative side is often seen as using a very different kind of language. But what is happening is that liberals are also using exactly same language, not
Hmm.
listening to the conservative. Conservatives were often forced that they don't listen. But
Yeah.
now liberals are also exactly same thing, same tone, same violent voice, same violent words. Then where is the whole philosophy of liberalism is to accept whatever is coming and then
Hmm.
counter it with your own thoughts and words and emotions and not let the other person come in only.
Hmm.
And I think that's what the moral high ground, which becomes much more tricky, which breaks the whole process of dialogue, is that one side you are saying that you are up for everything and all liberal, but on the other side you are also doing the exact same thing
Hmm.
that you are against even in the beginning. So
Hmm.
how? So what is the difference? There's no difference. Now there are two hard stands taken by two opposing views, but there's no middle ground in that. And I think that something becomes very tricky.
Hmm.
And on one side you are for everything, favor of. On one side we are in favor of everything, and on the other side, the language, the tone, everything becomes exactly what we were opposing. And that's tricky. I think that will only break down the process of dialogue.
It's almost like when you see the opposite of one, it's like from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. It's almost they're polar opposites, and so in a strange way they're very similar. Maybe not in belief, but in how we behave. But the
Yeah.
actual lived opposite might be what's in the middle.
Yeah.
And I would
In
imagine. Sorry. Go ahead.
one thing in theory of oppress, they talk about that uh, if we don't go to the depth of it, the oppressor, sorry, the oppressed eventually becomes the oppressor also. So
Hmm.
that cycle never breaks.
Mm.
And that's what I think, at least I am seeing more in the society, also in political spaces also. The cycle is not breaking. We
Right.
are becoming what we are opposing eventually.
Mm.
So
I wanna and when I hear this thing about the cycle isn't breaking or breaking the cycle, I'm also thinking about breaking cycles of violence in smaller units, like within a family, for example, and how much inner work and how much courage it takes to actually do that, to step away from an older pattern and do it differently, because it requires you to keep your heart open and to let a question guide you, as you say, rather than an answer. And that means contending with profound uncertainty, that we don't know where we're going, but this is the question, and let that guide us rather than this is the solution. And I guess this brings me to my last question, which is about what do you think we can do to keep our hearts open, not just in I mean, I guess it's a question, the answer might apply to every layer, like families, but also across political divides and so on and so forth. But how do we keep our hearts open? How do we do that? What's your experience with
I think there are enough and more good people around us who are contributing in their own way. I think I'm lucky that I get access to them, and I get to spend time in rural parts as well and meet them. So I think for me that becomes one big hope. I think for young people, if I have to say, I think my one big request is that how do we engage with places and people we have not engaged before. I think that brings a different kind of beauty. Often, how do I break my own bubble of knowing
that?
knowingness and go to a place which is completely different and maybe sometimes uncomfortable also,
Yeah.
because that will open us up to many more new realities. So I don't know. I think we should do something maybe living bridges, and we can start something like a 5-7 day immersion process wherein like we are taking holidays,
Mm.
especially like middle class or upper middle class has the choice to take holidays. I think lower middle class or economically weaker section, they don't even have a choice to take
Mm.
holidays, but a big section of our country has a choice to take holidays. Can we like dedicate 1, 3, 4, 5 day holiday to a place which is not like us, to a community which is not like us? And I think that will do something.
Mm.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah. So it's about, I'm hearing two things. I heard it's about kind of drawing inspiration from people around you and drawing on the fact that there are people who are speaking this language and who are genuinely joyful to be around. And the other bit is around staying open to other realities and letting ourselves stretch beyond those comfort zones and this bubble of what is known to beyond that.
yeah. Sometimes sitting with the Didi who comes home to cook and taking out an hour and just listening to her life story, her children, her parents, or like
Mm.
sitting with an auto wala sometime on the roadside, just listening to them, making that very simple choice of just listening.
Mm.
I think that just changes. Yesterday I was talking to what is that called? Chokha bati. What is that Rajasthani food?
Right. Huh.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I was talking to
I,
this
is that Bati Choka? Yeah, or
Bati Chokha, I think. Yeah.
Bati Choka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So yesterday I was talking to a Bati Chokha wala and on the roadside, and I asked him to make a plate, and then we started talking, and then he shared that the income has gone drastically down. He used to put his
Mm.
like thela stall at Pari Chowk. Now he's thinking to put somewhere else because the footfall is less and people
Mm.
don't like this. There are so many other restaurants around there. So I think in that conversation, it automatically moved something within me. And then I went later in the night to order 10 plates because I was going somewhere for my lunch. So I thought, why not let me
Yeah.
go and do something? It will not make a huge difference in his life. It's one time order. But then it did something to me. It
Mm.
made me connect to that human being in that moment.
Mm.
And I think just taking those time out, listening to the other person also tells me about my own privilege,
Yeah.
which brings for sure humility. Uh,
It's about being open to the stories of people who we might want to, who we don't usually talk to, and who sometimes I had this memory of hearing it from one of the communities we worked with, where during the lockdown they said that no, a lot of aid came to the communities alongside them, but they were very small. And I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm going into a segue, but I got excited about this. But I liked this because what they said was, हमको देखकर भी अनदेखा कर देते हैं. They'd look at us, but they don't see us.
No, they make, and who doesn't want to be acknowledged in life? I haven't met anyone who doesn't want to be acknowledged or seen in life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think it's such a civilization level wound of being told that you have to cut parts of yourself off to fit in and to matter, and you have to be something other than who you are for you to have value. And that is a reality that everybody lives with, not just across economics backgrounds, across political beliefs. Most of us have grown up with this idea that we don't matter. So I can imagine that I was thinking, like, if there's a baby and you tell the baby that you matter and you're loved and you're okay as you are, the impact that has on that child is, and then imagining an impact like that on a community.
A big corporate, a startup gets a $500 million funding, but the media is not getting money to be free. Imagine if someone can put just $10 million every year in a media company to just be free, not be dependent on government advertisement, not be dependent on a big corporation advertisement. Just free media can change so much in our world. But people will not fund free media. People will fund a startup who will, I don't know, do something which we don't need, but eventually will create a need and become a unicorn. But organizations like ours might, like Living Bridges, will not get $1 million funding easily.
No. We don't need $1 million. So we need $22,000. Actually, that's what we for the next year. We won't say no to $1 million. I will say that, but we don't need it. We just need a small amount of money because we're volunteer driven, so we can keep going. But but I will say that it is incredibly difficult to. We're finding this challenge right now, and it's quite interesting also. But and there is a lot of faith that we'll find other ways and we'll do something. But for a relatively small amount of money, for us to raise that we've barely reached about 6% of our goal. And I think a huge part of that is we're not able to articulate or quantify what we're going to be doing. So we've tried. We've said that we did 780 participants last year from 44 countries, which is true. That we want to work on creating kind of a cadre of, like, I don't know. These are not words that I would come up with, but a group of people who are actively practicing nonviolence at the grassroots, and we want to be focusing on that. But it's very difficult to quantify it, and when you can't quantify it, it's very difficult to back it in the way that we look at it right now. So it's an interesting thing. We make choices with what we do with our money, which is also a political choice, whether we're aware of it or not. It's also a social choice. And then there's our own sort of, hesitation. Yahan par you have people who need food and ration and injections and medicines, and we don't want to take away from that meager amount of funding that is still floating around in the social sector right now. Yeah, that's been an interesting it's an interesting space to be in, to navigate, to just see what that means.
And a unicorn will not think like that. Like $1 billion startup don't think let me not take that funding because that's more urgent.
Yeah.
So I just have one appeal to all the people who are watching this, that this work of connecting people with people and connecting ourselves with our own deep self, I think is extremely important. It might not be seen valuable in the larger market-based world, but I think something like this is, for me, this is work of healing each other and healing the society. And if we don't invest our time, money, resources in work like what Living Bridge is doing, I think it will be extremely difficult in the coming decades to imagine where our kids will grow. because anyways we are seeing the side effects of what's happening, and it has come our home also. Be it the climate change thing, be it the pollution in Delhi, or the way our TV shows the word at 9 p.m. every day. So I think one of the most important fundamental thing that Living Bridge is doing is connecting our own self with our own hearts, and then connecting people, like building bridges. So my request is to come forward and support the work, and I'm up for, if you contribute in a decent way, I'm up for doing a session with your organization,
Wow.
with the company you are from, and engage in a much more meaningful way. That can be my contribution to your organization. Thank you so
Wow.
much for listening.
Thank you so much. Because I was going to say some version of that, but I have nothing more to add to that. That's beautiful. Thank you.
No, I think time is something that, and this is something which I love, and I would love to sit in a corporate house and talk about compassion and dialogue. So,
Wonderful. So I think that brings us to the end of that conversation. And you have this special offer from Prakhar. So please do take him up on that. And I'll add my own voice to this appeal that every little bit counts. It makes quite a difference for us, whether it's 100 rupees or more. It makes a huge difference to receive anything that you're willing to offer. So please do. And thank you for joining us. And thank you so much, Prakhar, for this conversation. I feel renewed and rejuvenated and very, very
thank
grateful.
thank you and all the best.